I'm so deeply honored and grateful that you're joining me for a fresh approach to painting, Gateway to the Inner Artist. Loosey Goosey 1, Letting Go. Freedom in painting is very important, and by loosening up your strokes, not paying attention to details so much like the Impressionists did, it gives you more opportunity to focus on other aspects of painting, like the effects of light. We're painting Our Dreams Make Us Come Alive. I'm so grateful that this painting was curated, reviewed, published, and distributed throughout Europe. So let's get started, and what we're going to do first is we're going to lay in where the waves are and our other shapes by using transparent raw sienna. So we have a wave churning in the bottom, and it's going to pick up and switch back up into the sky, but it's going to do all this in a very loose manner, or a loosey-goosey manner. So here we go. I'm going to just rough in my shapes and decide, okay, I've got my wave coming up here, disappearing into the sky. Okay, I like that. I've got a whirlpool over here, so I'm going to make a circle like a whirlpool. So I know that's where that is, and that's good, works out. This curves up and it goes up into the sky. Now that's really all I need because I've placed my shapes. Next thing I'm going to do is pick up some Hooker Green and Alizarin Crimson and a touch of Phthalo Blue. I've got all three colors on my brush, and I am going to start at the bottom with very large Z strokes. A Z stroke goes this way, curves around, and then touches the wave again. Now, these are very long Z strokes, and remember, this is my signature Z stroke that enables you to create water easily. Pick up some more of that color. Hooker Green, Alizarin Crimson, and Phthalo Blue. This is my darks. I'm putting in my darkest darks. Okay, and then that's in the foreground. Now I'm going to touch some of that color up into the curve. Only bits of the darkest darks are going to show through as we move up into the middle of the canvas. Deciding, did I go up high enough? And yes, I did. I'm going to encircle my whirlpool just so I don't lose that shape. I'm loosely placing my shapes into the canvas. Okay, I'm forming my spout. Decided that I haven't gone up high enough on this right side, so I'm going to go up a little further. Now remember, we have not placed anything in the center of the painting. We've made the spout slightly off to the right. That's purposely because we don't want to have anything that's the focal point right in the exact midpoint of the painting. I'm going to switch brushes now that I have the shapes in and the placement of my water. I'm going to move to a larger brush, take these same colors, Hooker Green and Alizarin Crimson, and I'm going to put in my darkest darks. Now you can hear that sound. That means my brush doesn't have enough water on it. So I'm going to add a little water to it. And I'm going to continue doing my long Z strokes all the way up to where the spout is. By adding water to my brush, the color of the paint has lightened. That's good because the color will lighten as I move closer to where my spout is. So it's happening automatically by my actions. The colors are changing, just as they should. I was careful not to start my water, or the biggest part of my painting, my focal point, in the center of the canvas. Sometimes there's a tendency to do this, and you want to avoid that. So we have placed the water in the bottom third of the canvas. We're going to have our spout in the middle area of the canvas, and then our sky will be that whole top portion. When I'm comfortable with putting in my darkest darks, I'm going to switch now to put in my sky. Clean my brush. Determine where my light is coming from. I'm going to have a light area right on this left side, so I can use light blue violet and just place some shapes. I'm using the edge of my brush to do this. I'm identifying where I want my clouds. That's good. If I rub too hard, the orange background will come off on my brush. So if you start seeing that happening, because this is acrylic paint, if you wet it up, the paint will soften and it will rub off your canvas. So use a light touch, a very loose light touch. Okay, I'm putting in my darkest part of my sky. So I'm creating the composition right on the canvas, just like I'm mixing my colors right on the canvas. I'm not mixing them on the palette. I'm going to pick up some purples. While I'm letting the bottom dry, I'm putting in the rest of my sky. I have light coming in from the left side, so I'm going to put my darkest sky colors on the right side, which is light blue and some violet. I'm just going to use the edge of my brush, and I'm going to rough in some purple, violet, depending on what color you have on your palette. It's not a dark diazonine purple, it's a light violet purple. Okay, I like that. That's the darker colors. Coming up out of the spout is white, and I've got some blues on this side. So I'll use up what's on my brush over here on this side of my sky before I start dipping into my whites. Right now I'm just making shapes. Okay, now it's the time. I've taken most of the blues and purples off my brush. I'm going to start with my whites. And I'm going to create marks using the edge of my brush still. I'm leaving some orange showing, and some orange is actually showing through my white. That's great. And I'm just creating shapes. So you want to create shapes with the white. So see how I made, that's a cloud. It's not just a stroke like this. You're actually creating a shape. You can do that by moving your arm around. The direction of how you hold your brush will change the shape of the cloud. I'm going to take it all the way off to the side. I know I want some, it gets lighter as I'm getting closer to my horizon line. My horizon line is where the clouds end and the water begins. I'm just loosely placing some color. I'm going to switch to my light permanent blue and put some light permanent blue shapes on this side of the painting. So I use my violet blue as my darkest with purple, and then over here on the left side I've used my light permanent blue to give me a lighter portion of my sky, always combining it with white. Okay, so I've identified exactly where I want the color in my sky. That wasn't too hard. Clean off my brush. I'm going to change to a different brush, always noting that the brush that I use has a chiseled edge. Dip my brush in water, soften that up. Now I'm going to pick up some phthalo blue and the light permanent blue. And now I'm doing my Z strokes over the darkest darks that I laid in initially. Now my Z strokes, as I'm close to the whirlpool, are shorter and closer together. The Z strokes in the foreground in my darkest darks are further apart and flowing Z strokes. Further apart and deeper. Okay, I'm picking up phthalo blue. You see how that phthalo blue isn't covering over my hooker green darkest darks. It's making a nice complement. Now I'm going to continue, and I will cover over the entire area at the bottom of my painting. In other words, I'm going to get rid of the orange. The orange complements the blue that you're putting on top of it, but it actually peers through. Sometimes people ask, why do you paint a color if you're going to just paint over it? And the answer is that orange will actually make your phthalo blue much brighter when it's finished. Don't forget to use your no-tan regularly so that you keep your shapes and movement of the brush in the forefront of your mind while you're painting. I'm going to pick up some more light permanent and continue on with my Z stroke. Light permanent and phthalo blue and a little white. So I've got all three colors on my brush, and I'm going to identify the area around the whirlpool by using Z strokes. But these are nice short Z strokes because they're close to the whirlpool. They're close to the top of where the water meets the horizon line. I just want to make sure that I have this shape clear in my mind. I'm loosely placing it, but I need to make sure that I have that direction. I'm going to take it up into the spout, just some curving marks up into the spout, taking my water, being careful not to cover over my dark areas. I'm going to just tap this area where the spout meets the horizon line on both sides and take it off the canvas. So we've got a nice rounded area. Then I'm going to finish painting the foreground, removing or covering over the rest of the orange. Now that I've let my darkest darks dry, it's time to do some glazing. I'm going to take the golden high flow acrylics, and this is phthalo blue green shade. I'm using a wash brush because it's soft and it's going to allow me to do some glazing. Add some water to the brush. I'm going to add a little bit of water to my glaze. I'm putting this in a cup because this is a very runny paint, and it will allow for a thin layer, which is another word for glazing, a very thin layer of paint. So we're going to paint over the bottom of this painting, which is your foreground. Now it's not covering enough, so I'm going to add a little bit more paint. I've added too much water, that's why that happened. So, okay, try it again. I'm going to paint over, yes. So that's creating a nice even coat. Just going to loosely paint right over the bottom area of this painting. Again, the foreground. I'm going to go all the way up to where I have my white marks, or I use light permanent blue. And you see how that glaze instantly creates depth. This is a perfect process to use when you're painting water. See how beautiful that makes it? It turns the white marks that you made to a light blue and instantly gives you many layers of color. Glazing is a skill. If you're a person that paints water or enjoys painting water, this would be something very important to learn. And the high flow phthalo blue is absolutely a vibrant, brilliant blue. Okay. I'm going to add some more shadow to my sky while my glazing is drying. It's so important that this glazing is completely dry before you start painting over it. If you don't, you'll end up smearing your paint. So we have to let this dry. Perfect time to go back up to the sky and do some finishing touches. I'm using a round pottery sponge. This sponge will give me my swirling motions and smooth out rough edges that I have in my sky. I'm using light blue violet and portrait pink, which makes a gray, but instead of using a dull gray, it makes a vibrant shadow color that I use instead of gray. So what I'm going to do is put some of this paint on my pottery sponge, squeeze my sponge so I get Mr. Peanut, and then I'm going to do in a circular motion, add some of this color to my sky, moving closer to my horizon line, leaving orange, but filling in most of it. I'm going to go over to the other side of my sky and again do the same thing, smoothing over some of my rough edges, not all of them, because the marks are what's going to add more character to the painting. So, not too much of this. This is an accent color. Now I'll go back into my pure blue and continue filling in the sky, leaving some orange holes, some swirling. These are sky holes that we're creating slowly, slowly, as opposed to jumping in and covering over all the orange. You want to pay attention to your shapes. And again, refer back to your notan, because your notan is going to show you where you have your shapes. A notan is a black and white of your painting. The thumbnail that you also have on your paperwork gives you your shadow areas as well as your complete lights and darks. I'm going to continue with Mr. Peanut and start picking up some whites, placing it in the center, well, off to the right, let's put it that way. White, so that I have a focal point coming of bright white clouds coming up off this spout. I'm going to start on this right, just right of the center point, and I'm going to carry those clouds all the way over here to the left side of the canvas. I've ended doing my swirling motion. I'm adding a rocking motion to Mr. Peanut, and that is going to give me some wispy shape to my clouds. I'm going to take the white, the lightest white that I'm using, all the way down to the left side of where my horizon line touches the water, just above the spout. While I still have my sponge, I'm going to pick up some yellows and oranges and just highlight. I'm using Indian yellow, and highlight some of the open areas so that I'm blending my orange with just a lighter shade of orange, which is my Indian yellow. Little bit of a harsh contrast right here where my white and yellow are meeting. So how do I resolve that? Just pick up some white on Mr. Peanut and tap that in. Now that white blends into where I had my yellow. I have put some light permanent blue. I'm going to pick up some light permanent blue and put this on this left side. Again, just another layer. As this dries, it will change color. So you'll decide how much or how little you want in your painting. I think I'm done with Mr. Peanut, so let me go back and pick up a brush. I'm going to do some more Z-strokes right around the whirlpool in white. I want to accent my whirlpool, so I am going to do that. Now I'm also going to touch some white behind, just a nice row of white, not all the way across, but a little bit of white on where the horizon line meets the cloud, right above my whirlpool. This is just drawing more attention to my whirlpool. Okay, and continue with my strokes, my Z strokes, getting larger as I go out. Now I need to look at this spout, and I'm just going to touch, not necessarily Z strokes, but touching the tops of the water, the waves that are coming out of the sky. I don't want to get the spout too large as it meets the sky. It's actually too big as far as I'm concerned. So how do I fix that? Go ahead and continue putting my whites in, and I know my spout will come to a point because it is a spout. Okay, so take my brush down, make sure I have the shape right. Okay, now what do I do in this round area? Because my spout is just a little bit too big, I'm going to pick up some orange, And I'm going to accent this area. I'm going to taking away some of my spout. Loosely taking it away, not covering up that whole orange area because I'm leaving some of that orange completely open. Now look at that. I'm shaping my spout, and I'm going to shape it a little bit with this same color. What I did on this side, I'm going to do on this side. Look at that. That is wonderful. Now, by using the orange, I've highlighted the deeper orange that was my base coat on my painting. I add a little white to that and I create another orange. So be creative with your paint colors. All right, and I'm just cleaning up the edge of where the horizon line is meeting this spout. I'm going to pick up some, clean my brush because I'm going to go into the blue. If I didn't and I left that orange on my brush, I would end up with mud. So I'm going to pick up some light permanent and I'm going to just tap that into the top part of my whirlpool. So I don't have a harsh edge where the sky meets the water. And now I'm going to pick up some white and just touching this in, giving myself some loose shapes, absolutely loose because this is the Loosey Goosey class. Okay, I'm liking the way that looks. I think that the harsh line right here between where the spout meets the orange is still too harsh. So what am I going to do with the paint that's on my brush? I'm just going to tap that darkness out, and that looks so much better because the white is closer to orange than the blue was. Now the very last thing, I'm going to get rid of the paint that's on my brush, go back up into where I have some white, and just loosely scumble that sky in. No two skies look alike, so you can keep replaying your class over and over until you get this exactly the way you want it to. So don't worry if you missed a spot. Okay, I'm going to switch brushes to a small fan brush. These small fan brushes, not large fan brushes, it will not give you the same shape, but a very small fan brush. Touch some white on the top of that brush, and now you're looking for waves. With the Z-stroke, you created layers of waves. So look here where you see the top of a wave, and you want to tap the top, gently tap the top of that wave. Don't put two waves together in a row. That's a typical thing that's done that is not correct. So we have one here, and then I have one here. So I'm going to tap the top of that wave. So you see how these are not in a row, but they're random. That's how a natural wave behaves. Put one right here. When you look closely at your painting and you take your time, you will find the tops of these waves. And you're going to do this in this darker area. Don't have your white too bright, and don't make these too big. Get used to using your fan brush, because you will use this technique in many of your water paintings. Okay, I think they're a little bit too harsh, so I'm going to go in with some phthalo blue on the same fan brush. I didn't clean my brush, and now I'm going to tap out some of that white that I just put in. This is the only way to do this. You you can't draw it in or it'll look drawn in. So we're tapping the top of the wave. That's white with a little bit of phthalo blue. And now we're going to let this dry. When it dries, I'll reevaluate it again. If I need to touch some more white, I will. If I need to touch some more phthalo blue, I'll do that as well until it's exactly perfect. Because my water has quite a bit of movement, there's another tip to creating an exciting painting, and that's take a little bit more white on your fan brush and just brush up in the direction that the water is going. You don't want to do too much of this, but you're going to create interest because this is where everything's converging, right in this area. So you would naturally have a little bit of splashing going on. So this is how we're going to create the splashing. I'm not poking the fan brush on the top of the wave like I was doing. I've actually turned my fan brush so that I'm touching the canvas and pulling up, and that instantly creates fabulous splashing in just such a very simple way. Now you can actually tell what's happening in this area. Not too much, okay? And then I look here and I say, gee, I would need to highlight a little bit more of the curve. I have too much darkness in this area under the whirlpool because there's a lot more happening. So I'm just going to pick up some light permanent blue and I'm going to put in a few Z strokes to give myself movement. And I'm going to take it right off the side. So now I have a little bit lighter color on this thin water. There. So now, by just using a little bit more light permanent blue, I've created this circular motion around the whirlpool. Ready to sign it.